Kind of building off that conversation, we heard about how some of this is seeping into the election campaign here in Canada. It has been at times a tough road on this campaign, with demonstrations at campaign stops and racist and misogynist insults and misinformation, someone throwing gravel at Justin Trudeau, for example. Fareed Khan has been following this campaign closely. He is the founder of Canadians United Against Hate and is on the line with us this morning. Fareed Khan, good morning.
Good morning.
I don't know if you heard just the end of our last conversation. What has concerned you as you've watched this election campaign unfold?
Well, yes, I did catch the tail end of your interview, and I was actually surprised that none of the candidates on that all candidates meeting actually challenged frankly, the insanity of what some PPC candidates are saying. What we're seeing in this election is unlike something we've ever seen before, and it's actually reminiscent of what we saw in the U.S. election with Donald Trump. We've got a party that's a far-right party that's anti-immigrant, anti-refugee, anti-science. It has embraced white supremacist supporters. Some of them have shown up at these anti-Trudeau, anti-liberal demonstrations. And I think we should all be very concerned about that. This party has gone from 1.7% support in the 2019 election, and it was polling below the Green Party when this election started. It has now leapfrogged the Green Party, is now almost double their polling support at about 6.2, 6.3%. Now, just what does that mean? That means that there is probably about 1.2 million Canadians who are seriously considering voting for a party that represents, I think, the worst aspects of the human character.
Now, I think a lot of Canadians assume that this worldview has a natural ceiling. That is that, okay, they might get 12%, they might get 18%, or worse, in even the most outlandish scenario, they might get a third of the vote. But that there's some natural ceiling there. I mean, and that therefore we don't have to worry about it. What's your response to that?
I don't ascribe to that view. I think any support that a party like that gets, and if it gets into double digits, that becomes a real danger to democracy and social cohesion within our society. Essentially, this hateful ideology that this party propagates is like an infection. And if you don't treat the infection, it spreads. And yeah, it might not kill you, but it's going to make you really, really sick. And I think that's what this is a sign of, that there's an infection in our body politic, in our political culture, and to ignore it would be a dangerous thing because it would be to our detriment.
Now, we do live in a democracy, and so how do you not ignore it while still allowing candidates who, use dog whistles and a wink and a nod to white supremacy? How do you handle that?
Well, I think we have to look to Germany and take a page out of how they've treated extremist parties. In Germany, extremist parties, white supremacist parties, parties that promote neo-Nazi ideology are banned. It's illegal under German law for such political organizations to take root, and rightly so, given their history. I think that we have to look at history to see what happens when parties like this, when political voices and political actors who advocate certain very distasteful and very ugly political policy proposals are allowed to get a platform and gain legitimacy. Because the thing is, I think what we have in Canada, there's a certain segment of the population that finds this, acceptable. And it used to be that they would hide in the dark shadows. But what's happened over the last 10, 15 years is that these voices have been given legitimacy. And then certainly when Donald Trump came along, he said things that were unheard of during election campaigns. He made those sorts of views legitimate. And now we've got a little taste of that happening in Canada. And I think we should all be very concerned as to what this means for our democracy in the future.
This, another issue that was raised during this campaign that's kind of related was Bill 21 in Quebec, which we saw at the debate, which prohibits any sort of visible religious symbols in public sector jobs. The moderator of that debate called the law discriminatory, and that has caused a firestorm of criticism in Eastern Canada. What do you make of what's happened out of that particular statement by Shachi Kurl and question from Shachi Kurl, and what happened after that?
Well, first of all, I think her question was entirely legitimate. I think her calling the legislation discriminatory was entirely appropriate. There are human rights activists and legal scholars who have said, yes, it is very much a discriminatory and prejudicial law. It targets racialized religious minorities, and it was mainly intended to target Quebec Muslims. There was a poll done just before the law was passed. It was published in results were published in the Montreal Gazette, which said that the main reason for the support of this law by white Francophone Quebecers was to suppress Muslims in that province. When you have that sort of response to a poll, and then you see a politician like Mr. Blanchette getting all huffy and indignant about people calling out that racism, and he calls it, well, no, this is an expression of Quebec values, then I think you have to say to Mr. Blanchette and then Premier Legault, well, you know what, if that's the case, if these sorts of racist and bigoted laws are an expression of Quebec values, then you better rethink what your values are if you want to be part of the body politic in Canada. I think it's absolutely, it's absurd to the extreme for the Bloc Québécois and the CAQ in Quebec to react the way they did, because what they are doing is, it's like an alcoholic being told you're an alcoholic, and he gets all indignant saying that, no, I'm not an alcoholic. Well, in this case, Mr. Blanchette, Mr. Legault, you are racists, and you're supporting a racist law, and stop behaving as if we've insulted you. And I say this as someone living in Quebec.
And I'm afraid we have to end our conversation there. Fareed Khan, it has been very interesting speaking with you as well this morning, and I wish the conversation could go further. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Fareed Khan is the founder of Canadians United Against Hate. We reached him this morning in Quebec.